Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk about Shadowdark. We're going to talk about Kelsey, Dionne, and we're going to talk about a brand new dungeon master. Runs D&D for 5 years, runs D&D 5e for a year, and then gets on the internet and says, "Hey, everybody, stop playing D&D 5e. You're a better alternative is Shadowdark, right?" And I played D&D for 5, and refers to the PHB as this stupid book, right? And it's like, hey, everybody, I got a year in on D&D 5e, but Shadowdark's the place to be, right? So I come in and I'm like, hey, you should, but also I came in and I'm like, no, Shadowdark is not a good alternative. Your own players are telling you that, right? And then Kelsey Dionne comes in and starts defending her game against D&D 5e, right? So this is a classic struggle right now. And the reason this is happening is the OGL crisis happened at the beginning of 2023. And you play yours, you will play mine. Those days are done. Basically, we realize tabletop role-playing is a small sphere and everybody needs everybody else's players, right? Everybody's fighting for the best, right? We, D&D wants everybody. They don't want people wasting time on OSR and indie games. And the OSR and indie games are like, oh my gosh, we cannot get, Dungeons & Dragons errata is outperforming our greatest releases, right? And they're trying to pull from our community, our D&D 5e community. And this guy was very clearly, telling people, hey, you're better off on these OSR games, right? And I'm like, you're a year in, man. Like I don't feel like I don't. And so I pushed back and I said, hey, your players are not having a good experience on Shadowdark by your own words, and yet you're telling people to abandon D&D 5e, right? So I jump in the middle of this, right? So I'm telling you, stay on Dungeons & Dragons. Do not waste your time on OSR and indie games like Shadowdark. And I got another reason why, right? And link below, you can see the entire conversation between me and this gentleman. Very smart, kind, wonderful person. We just have a very strong disagreement on whether Dungeons & Dragons is epic, right? And I will say, I'm a Dungeons & Dragons champion. I'm a Dungeons & Dragons advocate. And I will no longer stand for people who are saying, you guys should abandon Dungeons & Dragons for the OSR and the indie. D&D bad, OSR indie good. It's a lie. Like, D&D is the best in the world and has everything it has, not because it's trading on its name, but because of merit. Because they drop a 256-page hardback, many of which you will find full reviews of right here on this channel, and they're dropping those with amazing art, amazing layout, and on the art side, it's not even debatable. It's literally the best fantasy art in the world, right? Like, it's so phenomenally good, right? And not just like, oh, that's my opinion. Like, Dungeons & Dragons gets its artists from Magic the Gathering. Those guys put out like 300 to 1,000 pieces of fantasy art a year, right? This is not debatable, in my humble opinion. And its designers are the best in the industry, and they're literally swept in from the OSR. And this is my point. I'm so tired of the OSR and indie pretending that they have the best, when D&D is literally taking their best, right? The best designers from Pathfinder are building D&D today, right? And D&D has guys that have been there for a decade, more than a decade, right? It is the best because they do amazing work every 3 months, and they drop it like it's hot at a pace no other OSR and indie are or can. Right? So here's my issue, right? So Kelsey Dionne rolls up, right? She's like, hey, I got this great little indie. You definitely can, and is supporting his claims that people should be switching from D&D 5e to Shadowdark. Here's the problem, okay? Kelsey Dionne comes and she's like, I'm a tough little indie and I'm a tough little OSR, and you can trust us to do the right thing and give you great play. But the problem is, the world has changed. And this is the part that Kelsey Dionne isn't telling you. She's a centimeter away from being D&D, from being Dungeons & Dragons. Shadowdark is looked at right now, right? And this is the issue, right? You want the best there is in tabletop, you're only going to get it in tabletop role playing. You're only going to get it through Dungeons and Dragons. Not only does Dungeons and Dragons outperform OSR on Indie on the regular, but now the OSR and the Indie have literally been converted into a farm team for Dungeons and Dragons. And the best OSR and Indie are found like a drumbeat under Dungeons and Dragons Beyond, in the partnered content section. Grim Hollow, Critical Roles material, Exandria, Wildmount, Humblewood, Dungeons of Drakkenheim, and the point is, right? Kelsey Dionne could say whatever she wants, right? Matthew Colville has done everything she's done, right? And his stuff is sitting, and Flea Mortals, MCDM's best material is simply Dungeons and Dragons content right now. And Kelsey Dionne can put a stance up as an OSR, but the reality is at any point, she can get a call from WotC, and Shadowdark can just be another piece of content under D&D Beyond, right? D&D Beyond, Dungeons and Dragons is not just the best, but it routinely gets the best from the OSR and Indie regularly. And it is my humble opinion that Kelsey Dionne is literally a centimeter away from her game being under the Dungeons and Dragons banner, right? So the reality is, and what makes her special? What if she gets the call, how is she going to be stronger than Matt Colville, right? How is she not going to go, oh yeah, you can sell 10 times what I've sold in the last 3 years in probably the first 3 months? Yeah. Shadowdark is just content under D&D Beyond partnered content now, right? So that's my issue. And even beyond that too, I have incredible respect for Kelsey Dionne, okay? I think she's the best in the OSR, the very best in the best person to ever write OSR content. But my point is, the best in the OSR does not even rank close to the worst D&D designer, right? But with that said, I actually think, and I've already said this, I'm on record already right here on this channel. That's another thing is Kelsey Dionne's like, I have this strong OSR stance. I believe she's actually on the short list for new D&D's a design lead, right? And the reason why is Dungeons and Dragons needs a female design lead. It's never had one in the 5 decades. And Kelsey Dionne is brilliant, and she could be the design lead on Dungeons and Dragons. So my point is, when you hear these little OSR like, they show a tough stance, they're a centimeter away from being Dungeons and Dragons, right? And that's the issue is Dungeons and Dragons can sweep these people up anytime they want and make them a stable hand in their stable, right? And it's not the same on OSR. OSR does not have the power to draw anybody away from D&D. But D&D routinely gains the best content and the best creators from OSR and Indie. And so my point is, anybody could say what you should play, but let's put some evidence behind it. And I'm telling you right now, if you look at D&D and you compare it to Shadowdark, anybody who's telling you Shadowdark is better than Dungeons and Dragons is just not looking at the evidence, in my humble opinion. So, and I truly, and the reality is, and the very best of OSR can become D&D overnight, literally overnight, right? And it's just not the case the other way around. You want the best tabletop role-playing experience? Stay on D&D, in my humble opinion. Link below, you'll see all the conversation. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. This Dungeon Master, just want to reiterate, super smart guy, great father. I just think he's wrong on Dungeons and Dragons. The important part's when I hear your humble opinion on Shadowdark, Dungeons and Dragons, OSR, D&D content, D&D Beyond, partner content. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.